you are probably one of the president's most outspoken supporters. You've been critical of some things over the past little while that he has done. Is, in your mind, Donald Trump getting soft or moving to the middle? How do you see this?
Well, Leland, thanks again so much for having me on. And look, for myself, and when I read what my followers are writing in, either whether it be on X or on Human Events Daily, what I think a lot of people are looking at is that there's a lot of support for President Trump that we have. There's certainly a lot of support for President Trump that I have. But when it comes to the conduct of things like this Epstein situation, we really look at A.D. Bondi. And the fact of the matter is, she brought me into the White House very early on, along with a number of other people, said that the files were going to be released. She hands me this trove of documents that it turns out were already released, and said, well, this is, just phase one, and there's more that's going to come. So just you wait. You're going to see that. Now we wait 5 months, over and over and over. And then it turns out that nothing actually comes out. So I think that what's really going on here is tension between things that were promised on the campaign trail, then things that were promised by A.G. Bondi after she got in versus what's actually being done.
Fair enough. I just want to stay with you for 1 second. We're going to get to Erika in just a minute. You make the point that there were things that were promised and then there are things that were done. Put together for me, because this isn't the first thing, right? The strike on Iran, Steve Bannon, Charlie Kirk, and others were very against. Now you have a lot of the far most extreme parts of MAGA very upset at the idea of some kind of probation, parole, amnesty, whatever you want to call it, for farm workers and hospitality workers that the president says need to come. Are you prepared to support everything that MAGA does, or are you going to hold the president to the parts of his campaign promises?
Hey, this is MAGA Fight Club. MAGA's always ready for a fight. And at the end of the day, we're fighting for America first. We're fighting for the United States of America. And what we campaign for, even at the RNC in Milwaukee, these are mainstream policies that were laid out, mass deportations now. And look, we've seen what Stephen Miller and Tom Homan and so many others have put out. Obviously, we've seen ICE raids over the past 24, 48 hours that really back that up, including, by the way, on farms. And so that's something that I'm going to continue to support.
Okay. Want to play for you. This is Charlie Kirk, Steve Bannon, Tucker Carlson about some of their differences with MAGA. Take a listen.
If you want to break our coalition, go and push amnesty. That right there would be a complete collapse of everything that we have worked for. Everything.
For this to go away, you're going to lose 10% of the MAGA movement. If we lose 10% of the MAGA movement right now, we're going to lose 40 seats in 26. We're going to lose the president. You don't even have to steal it, which they're going to try to do in 28.
All my hope is in Trump, and I hope that the administration course corrects and does it really soon.
Erika, I think this brings up an important point. Is MAGA a philosophy and principles, or is it about President Trump, and therefore whatever President Trump decides to do, most of the MAGA base is going to support?
Well, President Trump created the MAGA movement, let's not forget. And he, of course, is not only the leader of our party, but the leader of the MAGA and the America First movement. He does set the standard for a lot of the promises that have been made, both in his campaign and by congressional and senatorial candidates who ran alongside him. But I will give you an example. When he talked about helping farmers and the workers associated with farmland, and that was interpreted as amnesty, and that's where a lot of these comments had come from. Secretary Brooke Rollins came out and emphatically said there will be no amnesty. And whether that was in response to the base, considering that possibly Trump was talking about amnesty, I don't think that he was, or a guest worker program, whatever the case might be.
I think Erika, I think it's important.
Listening to the base.
It's really important, though, to drill down on this, because the base was really against the Iran strikes, and then all of a sudden they happened, they were a success, and suddenly the base and a lot of the sort of more vocal parts of the base were for it. But you say whether it's amnesty or a guest worker program, there's big differences there. There's parole, there's probation. We made the point on the show last night that this was a chance for President Trump to do what Joe Biden couldn't do, what Obama couldn't do, what Bush couldn't do, which was comprehensive immigration reform. So I think the words here do matter, and I guess that's the question. If President Trump goes forward with one of these pretty bold initiatives, should he expect MAGA to get in line?
Well, I disagree that the base was against the the attack on Iran, because many said, I'm fine with us taking out their nuclear program, but I don't want us to go in and put troops on the ground or get into a forever war. And that's why you see there was a concern that if we took out their nuclear program, it would lead to another forever war or a change of regime involving U.S. troops. That didn't happen. So I think President Trump did exactly what he said he was going to do in that situation. And I think we're going to see the same thing here when you're talking about he did want to listen to farmers who said, you know, we can't operate on such a short notice. Give us some notice and allow us some time to accommodate what you promised. Brooke Rollins came in, said there's absolutely no amnesty, but we're going to do this in a way that is not going to leave our farmers short and leave the country in a place where we have a national security crisis because we don't have enough food to feed the people of America.
Look, we've been arguing that point.
Listening to the base in these situations.
This Epstein issue is one that is very different than the issues that have been created or scandals sort of created by the media. This came from inside the MAGA movement. This is Megyn Kelly talking about Pam Bondi. Take a listen.
I have nothing against Pam Bondi as a human being. I was fine with her nomination and her confirmation, and she's been loyal to the president, and I get that President Trump needs a loyal attorney general. But there are a lot of other people who can be loyal and competent in that job. Here, she is the reason that things are unraveling around this story right now.
Jack, what's the balance for President Trump's supporters who are loath to ever give the media a scalp, who are loath to ever allow and give an inch, right? I think it was Steve Bannon who was the original honey badger in that sense of the word. But at the same time now, this demand for Pam Bondi to go is coming not from sort of traditional Republicans or squishy rhinos. It's coming from inside the MAGA movement. Why is that?
Yeah, Leland, and I'm actually here at that event with Megyn Kelly right now, where she just said that on stage, and the entire crowd just started cheering. Here, we're down at the Turning Point event in Tampa, Florida, and you know, you've got people who are sitting there saying, "Wait a minute, we feel like we're promised a bill of goods." And I said the other day, and I'll say it again, that it really feels like a Hillary Clinton kind of statement to come out from saying, "Oh, well, it doesn't matter that much. This case is closed. Let's move on." That's what MAGA remembers being treated like under Hillary Clinton when she was running, when she was Secretary of State. And so for a lot of people out there, they're saying, look, we want results at the end of the day. And I would agree with Megyn. It's not personal at all, other than the fact that Pam Bondi personally said to me that there would be more coming, and now she's saying there's not.
Well, in fact, she said there never was, right? She said the client list didn't exist versus saying that it did exist. Jack, I want to get you on this point about whether or not President Trump can translate the wins he's had, and they've been significant. We went through them last night, stock market record highs, the Iran strike, on, to legislative wins. Because if you're going to enshrine a secure border, if you're going to fix the immigration system and do these kinds of things, it has to be done legislatively. Does he have enough, I don't want to call it wiggle room, but runway, trust, whatever you want to call it, with your part of the base to do things that may not be 100% MAGA in order to get other big wins in some kind of deal a la Reagan, Tip O'Neill, Newt Gingrich, Bill Clinton?
Well, I will tell you,
I think it depends on what kind of deal.
I just want to let Jack get in on this. Go ahead, Jack.
Of course.
Oh, sorry. No, and I really think it depends on what you're talking about. And if you are talking about something where it's border, if you're talking about something where it's something that bases in alignment, I think absolutely, sure. Now, we just had a huge piece of legislation pushed through with the big, beautiful bill. And so as much of a heavy lift as that was, the very close vote that at 50-50 in the Senate with J.D. Vance breaking the tie, that was a massive lift for the White House. You know, the question is, of course, are we going to see another one between now and the midterm? terms.
Right.
Usually you don't see a president doing that. Barack Obama, of course, famously tried to, and was successful in doing so with 2 pieces of legislation. The second, of course, being Obamacare, which moved over into his second year in office, even though this President Trump's second term, it kind of functions like a first term in many ways. So it's possible. And I think, of course, if anyone can do it, it's President Trump. But at the same time, it really depends on whether or not it's one of those foundational issues. Amnesty, of course, being one of them, and illegal aliens for MAGA.
You know, Erika, you say he's had a lot of wins. I couldn't agree with you more. But he's not had a lot of legislative wins. Build Back Better was all done with Republicans. There was not a single Democratic vote. He himself has talked about doing something in some bipartisan way, has talked about that. How much, again, how much trust does he have with the MAGA base to start making concessions to somebody like Henry Cuellar, a conservative Democrat who wants a sealed border but says, I got to get a little something, a little concession in order to be able to vote for this?
Well, I don't have a lot of faith in the Democrats to side with Republicans to get anything that Trump wants done, to be honest with you. And that's why so much was put into the big, beautiful bill. And as you know, he got his tax cut wins. He got no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. He got school choice, huge school choice wins, higher education accountability, caps on student loans, a border wall, mass deportation funds for Tom Homan and Kristi Noem, right? Tons of legislative wins through this bill. And he'll have another reconciliation bill that he can pack those wins into as well. I don't have a lot of faith that the Democrats are going along with anything that Trump wants to do, even if they agree in principle, because it doesn't go along with the narrative that they're trying to paint of him.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.